it's not about just being there. That's the minimum.
Daddy, you're on your phone. Daddy, get off your phone. I was actually in the wrong.
Parents think they have to be perfect, and no, like you need to model being a whole human.
I just wasn't showing up even the best that I could show up. It was a big shame.
Women are harmed by gender stereotypes, but men are as well.
The dad energy doesn't have to be pure masculine. It could be softer. It could be empathetic. Let's dad. Welcome to the DadderUp podcast, redefining what it means to be a dad, one story at a time. Today, we're joined by Dr. Kari Adamsons, one of the country's leading researchers on father involvement and co-parenting. She spent her career studying what makes dads matter, not just how much time they spend, but how they show up. We're talking about what the data really says about fatherhood and how new tools like DadderUp can turn that science into daily action. So let me ask you, how do you prefer to be called, Dr. Adamsons or Kari?
Kari is fine, please. Thank you.
Just making sure. You're always a doctor in my heart. So thank you so much for being a guest. I appreciate it. Not going to lie, I'm very, 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 very excited to speak to you about all things relating to, fatherhood and to some of the research you've done.
Great. I'm excited to get started.
So you've had an incredible career studying fathers and families, but what first drew you into researching fatherhood and parent relationships? What's some of the genesis or the origin of that?
So it dates back to when I was in college. I was a psychology major. I was interested in child abuse prevention. I had done some work with the court systems, with the foster care system, and I was doing an internship with a local agency in Virginia around child abuse prevention. And the project they asked me to look into, most of the programs then were focused on moms. It's the primary target for any kind of child abuse prevention. And they'd started to realize maybe there's this other parent in the household that we should also check on. And so they asked me to do a little bit of research on, do dads matter? And should they be trying to include fathers in their child abuse prevention program? Spoiler alert, the answer was yes. And so that was sort of the genesis of it. When I went back to graduate school, all the classes I took on families and parenting, I realized 90% of what we knew was about mothers, not about fathers. And so
why do you think that is?
We have this norm in our culture that moms are supposed to be the primary caregivers, right? They're the ones who are the primary taking on the day-to-day of parenting. And so if we wanted to understand parenting and how it affects kids, we should go straight to moms, and dads were sort of optional, which is interesting because it's a flip from historically when dads were the patriarch and they were the primary ones. It dates back to all kinds of different changes that we've seen historically. But right now, we assume that moms were the only ones who had a real influence. We've come to realize in the last 30 years, absolutely not. Dads are also influential and oftentimes uniquely influential in a lot of ways.
Well, first, I want to thank you for caring so much. And it just so uniquely ties into DadderUp, because I felt the same thing. The genesis origin of DadderUp was, why are we not as a society celebrating dads and dads showing up? But to the point of, I don't want to do spoiler alert, we'll talk about a little bit some of your research about what does that mean? Just because you're there butt in the seat, Mr. Russell, doesn't mean that you're kicking butt as a dad. But that is the true genesis and origin of the movement that we're trying to create as well. But for people who haven't read your work, give us a big picture. What's the mission behind your research? What kind of questions about dads and families are you trying to answer?
So in the last 30 years, we've learned a lot. We've learned that dads matter, but we're still trying to figure out how and why and when and what are the details. So my work looks a lot at, you take your favorite topic, add with dads, and then that's now my new research area. So I've looked at things like how fathers influence childhood obesity, how dads are involved or not involved during divorce processes, how dads transition to parenthood, and how that's unique or the same as the transition is for moms. And looking at risk behavior prevention, things like substance use and risky behaviors and the unique role that dads play. So I've been sort of bouncing around a lot of different arenas trying to say, okay, when we look at this and we look at how dads have a unique influence, how they play out in terms of their behaviors and how kids are receiving those and outcomes, what does that look like?
So you're saying when you have children leading up to the birth, there's no book, there's no nothing?
Shockingly, no.
Sorry, there's no how-to.
There's no handbook. Actually, so funny story. When I was in graduate school, I checked out a book because we have all kinds of, handbooks of this and that and just general accumulation of knowledge. And I checked out a book called The Handbook of Parenting. And the librarian she's like, there's a handbook for this? I had no idea. I'm like, no, trust me, it's not that useful. It's just the research that we know on things. But yeah, there's no instruction manual.
Has a fever, call this number. There's 3 numbers, right? There's a 911. Like, oh, thanks.
Yeah, exactly. The how-to is a little sketchy for all parents, but especially for dads. So transition to parenthood, we teach parents, here's how you breastfeed and here's how you change a diaper, and then we send you home and say good luck. And moms have typically grown up. We have young girls who babysit their siblings or who, babysit neighbors. They have a lot of caregiving experience. Dads don't. We actually look a little sideways at dads who are interested in caring for young children. So they don't get the experience, and then we wonder why they don't know what to do when their first kid is born.
Do you think that's just around what it means in society, right, wrong, different, to be masculine and a guy? And like, what do you think some of the reasons are behind all that?
Absolutely. So, one of the classes I teach on men and masculinities, day one of class, I start with three questions. And I say, okay, what does it mean to be manly? What does it mean to be masculine? And you get all the adjectives of, you have to be strong and you have to be tough and you have to not be weak and you're a leader and you're this and you're that. And I say, okay, next slide. What does it mean to be a good man? What do you want the men in your lives to be? And we get a whole other list of words like you need to be honest, you need to be respectful, you need to be kind, you need to be all of these things. And then the third slide, which I've never had to change yet, says, why are these two lists so different? Right? Because they're all
Set up. You
men.
set them up.
I do, because I know this is what our culture thinks, right? That what it means to be masculine and manly and what it means to be a good man or to be a good father or a good relationship partner, they're problematically different in those expectations, but we expect the same people to do those completely opposite things somehow.
Yeah, those are some big pillars, and same thing with the data upside. So it's like taking a step back. I zoomed out 30,000 feet, and I was like, you know what, Kari? Not that I was talking to you at the time when I was building this, although I probably should have, to be honest. I really should have. I was like, what are dads right now? I have a truck. I drive my kids to school, and in it, there's a book, Dad Jokes. And my youngest daughter, Gabby, she reads them, and they're hard.
They're awful.
They're dad jokes. They are
Yes.
horrible. But I was like, it's the gifs, the memes, the YouTube shorts, and it's all like I would call it almost like dad deprecating, not self-deprecating, but
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like, why are we nuts? And that was the word. Some of the big terms are celebration and like our dad flex. Dad flex is kind of like a common trendier version of what I think it means to show up. But why are we not celebrating that guy? Why do we always have to like dad deprecate? That's been a core philosophy and things I've seen. And that's where I was like, you know what? I'm going to be the guy no matter what it takes. It's all about the masculine energy versus feminine energy. I'm a big guy. I'm like 6'3", 260 to 310, depending on how many cheeseburgers or jet tailgates I go to. But I have two little girls. They're 7 and 9, and I'm very much in tune with what it means to be a girl dad. Does that mean I'm not masculine because I'm not pounding my chest, like dances with wolves, eating some buffalo in front of them with blood everywhere? Like that doesn't mean you're masculine. There's so many definitions around that, but that is a big part of what we're trying to, change the agenda, change the narrative of what it means. To your point, like I almost after this conversation would love those slides to incorporate into the DadderUp community because it's the exact point. We don't have to be cursing, pounding our chest in front of the really expensive car. That doesn't make us masculine, let alone a good dad. It's, all the different things that you reference. I think it's super cool. But I know that you've written about the difference between being around and being engaged. I love
I
this
have.
topic of conversation. So like for you, what behaviors actually matter most in the father-child connection? Like for me, I remember reading an article, and it was before this, probably a handful of years ago, and it reminded me of not just necessarily being a present father, but around parenting and business entrepreneurs, and what does it mean to actually be present, and the differences of when you're with the kids, should you just be with them, or should you kind of do it all one at the same time? I remember there was I won't say the company name, but it was one of their CEOs, and it was a she, but there's a lot of she CEOs, so it doesn't single anybody out. But they said, hey, what was it like being present and intentional with your kids and their sporting events? And she's like, you know what? They don't care. As long as you're there, they don't even really care if you're paying attention. I was always on my laptop anyway. And I was like, oh, Kari, I don't know if I agree with that. But then also, I don't do the best job as an entrepreneur differentiating time with the kids versus work. Owning a mortgage company, somebody calls on a Saturday, there has been the instance I've missed the goal scored by my oldest to take the call, and it stings and it's
Right.
difficult, but I can tell you, like, probably one of the most interesting piece of this conversation is just me shutting up and listening to you about the differences of being engaged versus being around. Do you get a medal for just showing up? Or like, what does engagement mean to you?
It's a big question, right? We are a multitasking society. We are constantly connected in 50 different ways all at the same time to all these different people, and it is harming our connections to those people, right? I don't think that's a secret to anybody, or a big truth that I'm uncovering that nobody's heard before. We are not fully present for most people in our lives, and that's coming out in our work, that's coming out in our relationships, that's coming out in our parenting. I disagree with the CEO, right? It's not about just being there. That's the first step, right? That's the minimum. You have to be there in some way. But kids know if you're paying attention or if you're on your phone and kind of yeah and half listening, and it's easy to just get distracted with a billion other things that are going on, but they need someone who is there and who is listening. There was a big debate back in, the 80s, 90s probably, about quality time versus quantity of time, right? That, it's like, okay, we're all working really hard, but as long as you get that quality time in. Here's the problem: kids don't schedule when they need that quality time
Yeah,
in
you're saying
ways
there's
that
no
fit.
time blocking as parents? Like, hey,
No,
Thursday, 6 to 7:30. That
right, and we're good, and we're gonna talk about all the things that you need to talk about, and we're gonna answer all your questions, and I'm gonna impart all of my parenting wisdom on you, and then we're good until next Thursday. No, it's the conversation in the truck on the way to school when they're like, "Hey, I had this random
they're
thought that."
desperately reaching for that quality time.
Right, you have to have those little moments because that's what makes up the big moments. It's not just, "I'll schedule the
That
big
is the
moment."
coolest takeaway. I am literally, and I'm not just saying this because I'm talking to you. I was very, very excited for these combos because you're so smart around the space. That is such a good takeaway. The takeaway of the moments aren't planned. You can't say,
No.
"Hey, I want to lose weight. Let me go get my meals. I'll hit the gym every morning at 6 a.m." And obviously, typically it works. And I'll do my, 4 or 5 thousand steps. I'll finish up later night at 7 p.m. It's finding when it makes sense for them, and then that's when you're given the opportunity to show up. It's not when you are ready to show up. It's when they need
Exactly.
you at that moment.
Yep. Absolutely,
It's
100%.
cool because funny enough, I actually try to do a lot of, and the DadderUp side will have a huge social media push because we want to make this. We called it FOMO, fear of missing out.
Oh, yeah.
We try to create this thing called like FOMOIC, right? Fear of missing out on your kid. So creating this, almost like everything in this world is trending now. It's your point of like no one being able to be, present and intentional. Everything has to be trending. So wouldn't it be cool if it was trending to have a fear of actually missing out on those quality moments when your kid is looking for you to show up? Like, wouldn't that be cool if that was the thing and the
That would be
trend?
cool. Yes. But even if it wasn't trending, right? Like, we need to not be
Of
so worried
course.
about what's visible and what's the for show. Like, it's those behind the scene moments that really matter, that even if nobody else knows it, your kid knows it.
So I was trying to do some of our initial stuff, and I do a lot of content with my kids, and they like it. And I was getting called out by my older daughter during in front of my whole digital team, and it was actually really embarrassing. So my first reaction was I felt embarrassed, and she's like, "Daddy, you're on your phone. Daddy, get off your phone. If we could do any date in the world, Danielle, it would be Daddy be off his phone." And I was like, "This is really aggressive." She's 9 years old. She's not stopping, and I was getting upset. So I talked to her after, and I was like, "You really embarrassed me." And turns out I was actually in the wrong really bad. We talked about it, and she told me how she felt. She said she understands I have to work, and it helps pay the bills, but we created a secret word, a pride word called chicken. I guess she felt uncomfortable trying to hurt my feelings, saying, "Hey,
Mhm.
I miss you. I want, more to your point, quality time, not just you actually being there." So it turns out from that moment of really, I think, dropping the ball and just not seeing, we had a great conversation and great communication, and we realized that, exactly to your point, that it's hard, especially as an entrepreneur, unplugging and realizing, and then getting so defensive because work is so stressful. But it took a 9-year-old really embarrassing me in front of my whole team, and I deserved it. Sometimes, Kari, you ever hear like you got to take your lashes and move on
Yeah.
because you're
Yeah.
lashing? Well, I did. A beautiful, smart, blonde, blue-eyed girl called me out. I had a real cool conversation with her. And then, from that point forward, I think our relationship has progressed. But it did take even me, the founder of DadderUp, realizing that I just wasn't showing up even the best that I could show up. It was a big shame.
Well, and I think one of the big things, and this is for everybody, for parents, but especially I think for dads, because again, some of the masculinity norms around, being the leader, being in charge, being right, right?
Moneymaker,
The knowledge,
provider.
the provider, all of that stuff, right? Like parents think they have to be perfect, right? If my kid sees that I was wrong, if my kid sees that I made a mistake, like I can't admit that because that's going to make me seem like I don't know what I'm doing and they're going to lose faith in me. And no, like you need to model being a whole human for your kids. And so being able to say, this is how I felt, and then having that conversation and being able to admit, okay, yeah, you're right. I was wrong. Or maybe it's saying, look, I get it. And also, that means sometimes I need to be on my phone and I can't 100% of the time be accessible whenever you want, but let's have that conversation, right? Because that's how they're going to learn how to manage disappointment and frustration and embarrassment is by seeing you and how you manage it. They're going to do what they see you doing. And so if they don't ever see you admitting to anything being wrong, guess what? They're also never going to admit that anything's wrong, which is going to be a problem. That's a lot easier to learn when you're 9 than when you're 29 in the workplace.
Yeah, we made a deal. The deal, Kari, was, let me tell you, if you give your doctor stamp of approval, that when we're together after soccer and on the phone or in the car and all that stuff, I can't be on my phone. I can't be working. I have to be like into that, present, etc. But when I'm dad of the year and I let them play Roblox and they're playing some kind of game called like the Italian brain rot, tralala, tralala. I don't know if you heard of this game.
I
It's
have not.
good. That's why
Blissfully
you're so
unaware.
smart. No, I got a master's in psychology. I think my brain dies every time I watch them play it. But we have a deal. I want to give them 30 minutes to play this game that I'm able to check my emails and work. And that we shook hands. We actually made a cute little contract where like
Hmm.
I, Daddy Russell, promise. But they also agreed to do the same thing, that we have to chill with electronics, which is very difficult in this world. Whether their friends have iPhones and just the various things. But we actually, to your point, we made a really cool contract. So, and we just did this. So, and it's all kind of come from this movie. So, no matter what happens, I feel like I'm going to do a better job around this, only because it's difficult. It's like, right, first step of a problem is admitting you have a problem. It's very difficult, I think, especially for dads to be like, you know what? I spend so much time being intentional for weight loss, for business, for my own entertainment, scrolling on social media. I mean, it's addictive.
Right.
Why not be a little bit more intentional around all of this? I think it all makes sense. But we can pivot now a little bit into something that I'm even more interested in talking about, which is, talk about apologizing. So, their mom is an amazing mom. We decided that we were going to get a divorce a handful of years back. And even now, my daughters bring up to me, like, how is that fair? Or, oh, you're not coming to the games this weekend. And I typically do go to all of them. Sometimes I have a thing,
Hmm.
how is that fair? And I have apologized. And I've said, look, your mom and me, your dad, love you so much. The day both of you were born, were the best days of our life. And collectively, you have the best parents in the world. I know it'd be great if we saw you a little bit more. And frankly, I'm sorry. I would always do both of us our best job to show up and be present and put you guys first. But, unfortunately, sometimes in life, this is the reality. So, like through divorce and remarriage, how do you think dads can stay more consistent even when life changes, even when they're not in the house?
Boy, that's the big question, isn't it? It's complicated. And I think one of the bigger mistakes that people make sometimes is thinking again about just presence and not connection. Just staying together for the sake of the kids. It's rarely actually helping the kids, right? If parents are fighting all the time, if they're not modeling a healthy relationship, if they don't get along, again, kids are going to do what you do. So if what you do is a really unhealthy relationship, that's what they're going to grow up to do. And so in the best case in those situations is truly for the parents to split up. And yes, that means that you're not going to necessarily be in the household, but there are a lot of ways that you can continue to be present and engaged and connected. That is one of the areas where technology can really help rather than being a distraction. Things like FaceTime and things like being able to show up at events and texting, that we can be involved in real time ways, even when we're not physically there, in ways that were much more difficult years ago. But being able to have that presence and being able to be civil with your ex partner, there's a reason you split up. You probably aren't the best of friends, and that's fine. And we actually don't tell parents to try and do that, but we talk about what we call the business partner model, right? You don't have to love and deeply respect all the people that you deal with in business, but you at least got to be civil. You shouldn't be trashing them to all of your colleagues. You should be able to cooperate on key things. And so that's the real trick, is staying connected to your kids and then maintaining enough of a civil connection to your former partner that that's not going to be a distraction, and they're going to feel like they got to choose sides and all of that, because that's just a nightmare for the kids. They love both of you just like you both love them, and they need to be able to do that safely and feel like it's not a competition. It's not going to make one parent mad if they want to see the other parent. This is who they are. And so I think technology makes that a lot easier in some ways, but it's always going to be challenging.
So that's always like big picture. What you say makes sense. And then I think human beings get like, right, the emotion and the drama, but it totally makes sense what you're saying. And I can comfortably say that me and their mom have everything you just described, which is great. It does take work, just like even
Yep.
marriage takes work. Like
Absolutely.
you said, business takes work, but I think if you decide to have children, then you have to decide, or at least go into it preemptively, like you're going to give it your all, because that's even the point of the conversation with you, why I geek out over talking about all this stuff, because there are so many people that don't, so many people that have children, and I don't think they're putting in the work, and this is a lot of the origin of DadderUp. There's 75 Hard, which was more to, to lose weight and get in shape and, kind of get your mind in shape. There's Growth Day, which is an amazing platform. It's more for personal development. I was like, where's the thing for the dad, right? Because,
right.
To your point, I know you agree, it's in society, what are we told as men and dads? Figure it out. Just
Yeah.
man up,
Yep.
right? Just come on. Be a guy. Like, put the emotion aside. Like, almost like men aren't allowed to be emotional, but just figure it out. And it's hard. I could tell you, one of my biggest mentor, his name's Chris Delisle. He told me that the Chris Delisle moment is, as a dad, you're in the hospital, they're teaching you all the crazy stuff, how to breastfeed, and babies are crying and weird colors are happening, right? And
right.
Me as a dad, I cut the umbilical cord, so things are falling off in weird places. But guess what you have there, Kari? You have a nurse. You press a button, and here comes someone who's studied the last several years on how to be great at that, and help you with your kids, or keep them alive and do all the stuff, to do the thing. Then the Crystal Isle moment is when you go home, and you have the baby in the little car seat, and you bring him in, you put him in the kitchen, and you're like, what do you do now? No. And sometimes it's like your parents. I remember, Kari, how I grew up. Would I ask my parents for help? No. I remember what they did. Some of them, they're like, oh, I remember vanilla extract. We put that into something, but we didn't realize vanilla extract had alcohol in it.
Yeah. Put whiskey on your teething baby's gums, right? That'll help with the teething pain. Also,
Mom and Dad, I love you. I'm not saying you did that, but if you did,
when we know better, we do better, right? And we're constantly learning things that the way we used to do them because we didn't know is different from how we do them now. But the problem is there actually are a lot of resources out there for parents. There's different programs, there's webinars, there's books. The problem is it's really hard to sort what's good versus what's just some person's opinion that has no real basis in reality or fact or research or anything like those lines. And we tend to think that parenting is an instinct, right? Like you just automatically know what to do as soon as this little tiny human enters your life. And so, of course, you're going to instinctively do the right thing. And that's just not true. I mean,
especially with sleep deprivation.
Right. Having kids is hard. Like it's fantastic and it's hard, and you never know if you're doing it right. And that's the most daunting part of parenting. And if you feel like you can't ask people, or you can't look for things, or you don't know who to trust, because again, there's a lot of not helpful knowledge out there about how to handle different things. And that's daunting to figure out when you've got a little human screaming and you're just trying to figure out what's wrong and am I doing this the right way?
Yeah. So one of the cool things we built was actually, it's called the DDS, the Daily Data Success. So a big thing I believe is that we're intentional about so many things every single day. But it'd be great if I got your feedback even on the go forward for the future. So the DDS is the Daily Data Success. So every day, depending on, we've broken it down into 0 to 9 years old, 10 plus, and then the big thing, flex dad. So I felt like, to kind of pivot it for a second into the whole step parenting space in this society, there's like this whole black cloud about being a step parent. I talk about it in a lot of my videos, the story about my stepfather, how I think when everyone started getting divorced, right, in the 80s and 90s, I think it was just like became a thing. My stepfather came in, he provided, he worked 3 jobs. Me and my brother are large humans. We played football, we played baseball. I don't know if you like to cook. If you did, we would eat you out of house and home. We were
Right.
growing, right? Growing boys.
Yep.
My stepfather, John, outstanding cook. He was Italian. He's great at music. He knew how to garden, but like in a cool way. One of the best cooks I've ever, experienced. He was the head of a music department, but we were just like big behemoths. So he had two daughters. So now I consider, my sisters naturally. I mean, you're talking, I don't even know, 30 years. I don't even know how old I am anymore. 30. Yeah, something like that. That they've been in my life.
Right.
So what happens, like first time he's cooking for us, he makes chicken cutlets because that's what Italian guys do that are great cooks. He puts, I think me and my brother were 12 and 10 at the time. He puts it on the table, turns around, comes back 5 minutes later. Because my mom was
And they're
always
gone.
doing laundry during gone. My mom
Yep.
is really her fault. She always does laundry during dinner and always gets yelled at. He's like, why do you always have to do laundry during dinner? But it turns around, they're all gone. It was like a big drama. But the point is, he leaned in, did the thing. He didn't really know much about football. Went to every single football game I had. He drove me. I went to all boys Catholic school. He drove me to the train every morning. And meanwhile, I called him Kari John. He was a teacher at, one of the most revered music teachers, turns into principal, turns into administrator, Mr. Nocero, right? And what did I call him? John. And it always felt weird,
Right.
And it's like he would have so much pride because that's the thing about being a stepfather, what we like to call a flex dad, because we're trying to redefine what it means.
Mm-hmm.
In this society, if a dad has the kids half the time, it's almost unheard of. Typically, it's like 40, 60, right. Or, I have
30, 70. Yeah.
Exactly. So guess who, if the mom remarries, is there more? The stepdad. And so I was like, isn't that something that should be celebrated? Isn't that a big, indicator on the kid and their well-being? And don't they have a direct correlation because they're there more than the dad? So shouldn't that be something that should be celebrated and really talked about and really worked on? Of course. So I felt like, in my research this year, it's not celebrated. There is no, community anywhere where ecosystem of stepdads where it's like, oh my God, you wanted to marry into a family without the bio kid or an adoptive kid. And how hard is that? Maybe even harder than being the bio because you're kind of like on an island. Are you not? Are you teamed up with the mom? Have you read, all the books and like the collective, like this is how we're going to parent collectively is one, the good cop or bad cop. There's so much that goes into it. I just felt like, you know what, like redheaded stepchild, like that's a thing too. We make jokes of in movies. I was like, what if we, because to me, my stepfather deserved way more recognition. He always would introduce me and my brother and it would be like, oh, these are my boys. Well, these are my stepkids. And it was just like, just the word. So that's a huge thing. That's part of our ecosystem and our community, which is celebrating flex dads. A flex dad is defined as the child is not your bio child. So it's your stepchild, it's an adoptive child. But we break out our DDS, our daily dad of success, right? I just want to tell you like the flex dad space, which we can't wait to kind of roll out. We have your 0 to 9s, your 10 plus, and then your flex kids, a daily prompt for the dad or step parent to do. Specifically, we're going to start with like, hey, before your kid goes to bed tonight, tell them the day they were born, when you first met them, what it meant to you. Or if it's a step kid, or a flex child, tell them the first time you met them, right? So if we have these daily things, if you can go to the gym, if you could diet, if you can go to the office, right? If you could scroll on Instagram, you could spend 5-10 minutes obsessing today. What am I going to do today to show up? And really, to your point, from a quality time perspective, meet the kid when they need you, but also show up with those cool little things. I think they'll play a big part. But how do you think with the research you've done, like how can I even take that and perfect it? Do you agree with like every day, wouldn't it be cool if dads did something every day? And what can we take away from some of your research to really kind of perfect this specific art?
It's about creating habits, right? And so creating a habit of connection and intentionality. And again, like you said, it doesn't have to be, I'm going to spend 2 hours every day doing this. And it doesn't have to be something new every day. You don't go to the gym every single day and say, okay, yesterday I did this machine. So today I'm going to do this machine and tomorrow I'm going to do that machine. And, you're not actually building anything at that point. You're kind of jumping all over the place. One of the things that we've learned from, trying to help parents connect with their kids and develop healthy habits. It can be overwhelming because there's so much you need to do in life every day, what your kids need. So that idea of picking one thing, when we have, for example, a parent education class where we're talking about discipline, just to pick something. It's not about, okay, let's overhaul your entire system and now you're going to have 15 new things that you have to keep track of every single day because it's too much, you can't. But okay, this week pick one thing this week that you're going to do intentionally and you're going to do differently. And it could be you're going to pick 5 minutes before bed where you talk about how'd your day go, or it's you're going to intentionally, when they get home from school or they're in the truck on the way to the train or whatever it is, that there's a question you're going to ask that's a real intentional, thoughtful, open-ended, not a yes no kind of question, right? Something that's going to require thought and actual answers and result in an actual conversation. That's how that connection gets built. Number one, because you're having the conversation, but number two, you're communicating. We have what we call meta messages, right? So there's the message you actually send when you communicate, and then there's what you're telling the person by that message. So if I'm saying, oh, okay, that's nice, right? That's my actual communication. But if I'm saying, oh, okay, that's nice while I'm looking on the phone, the meta message I'm sending is, I don't really care, right? I'm not really connecting to you. But if I ask thoughtful questions like, what was your favorite part of today? What's something that you learned? Tell me about something you did with your friends today at school. What are you hoping that you're going to learn by the end of the year? What's something you're really struggling with that you're having a tough time with, right? That is not only going to give you that actual content, that actual information, it's communicating that meta message of you matter. I'm trying to learn about you. I care about knowing you. And that's as if not more important to that connection as actually having sort of just this laundry list of here's who my kid is and what they think and what they do. It's communicating to them that you really care and are invested in that relationship.
Yeah, sometimes I found, especially with my youngest, she loves everything you said. When she tells me a story, when she sees me looking at her, listening,
Mhm.
kind of really digging into it. Sure, like, do we buy her nice Christmas presents or bring her nice places, But like, I feel like she lights up when I'm
Yes,
into and it's so different. You know what that costs? Nothing. You know how
exactly.
easy that is? It's so easy. But
It
like, to
is.
your point, I've also I could see the dissatisfaction and sadness when I think they're telling me something, whatever, and then I have to take either a client call or, frankly, to your point, falling on the sword here, I'm on the phone on an email or whatever, and then all of a sudden they stop talking, and as a dad, you're like, wait, why they stop talking? They just like gave up
Because
on
you
the
stop
convo.
listening.
But do you know how much that probably hurts them though? Those little heart. It's brutal to admit, but I couldn't agree with you anymore. It's just one of those things. So you're a fan of the DDS, I hear.
I am. I am. It sounds great.
Yeah, so I'm not trying to leverage you 24/7. Allegedly, you have a job and a career and all this cool stuff going on in a life, but I definitely will be leveraging you and asking for advice. Because to me, it's like I said. There's a quick story about my grandfather. So my grandfather, my father's father, his name, we call him Poppy.
Mhm.
He was like a surrogate dad, probably my best friend. Throughout my life. And when I was 21 I used to talk to him every single day, even before cell phones, and it was like the long distance calls were crazy expensive.
Yeah,
He
back when
told
that
me
was a thing. For kids these days who have no idea what long
collect
distance
call.
means
You have a collect call from
from
Andrew.
exactly.
My dad, we would be at the mall and be like, you have a collect call from, ready to get picked up, dad.
Right.
Like
Oh, yeah. Totally game the system.
that was your hack. But no, I was 21 in college, really cool, going to the clubs, living the dream. And I stopped calling him for a little while. So he would call, he'd get like my roommates on the phone. He's like, wake up, Andrew. So like they'd come get me. And he would say, Andrew, if you have enough time to use the bathroom, you have enough time to call the old folks in the old folks home.
Mhm.
He actually said, to quote, you have enough time to poop, you have enough time to call Poppy. And I just did a video on that. It correlates the same thing. Like as a dad, if you have enough time to scroll Instagram, if you have enough time to go to the gym, right? If you have enough time to hang out with your coworkers at lunch, you have enough time to do the DDS. You have enough time to obsess over your kid. Like you said, it's not 24 hours. You're not giving up sleep like the Navy SEALs,
Right.
right? You 5-10 minutes, but that 5-10 minutes of being intentional, I think it's like, what do they say? Like little victories over time, win the war, you stack the little wins, and that's like the ultimate win. I think for me, it's just like all the work I put in with my kids, the little things. That's what's really built over time. You can't do it
Absolutely.
in one day. You can't
Nope.
bring your kids to Mexico for a week and then you fail the rest of the year.
And then you're good. Wash your hands of it. You filled your quota. Not how it works.
Yeah. So, but again, first step is all this messaging you're talking about, I'm talking about. it has to really resonate and hit home. It does for me. I could say self-servingly, I'm gonna be a better dad after this call with you, but you can't force that on dads. Some dads, they're just in their head, and it's like you have to have that self-realization as a father that all this stuff really matters. That's step one. But once you do that, and once you care and you want to show up and do all these things, then it's like a how. That's why we've created the DDS. It's just, it wouldn't be easier if, like, I'm in a coaching platform and they say, hey, go to the gym 3 times a week, do this, eat this amount of protein, don't drink. Like, at least I have someone
Ta-da!
telling me,
There's an equation. Yeah.
yeah, like, listen, you're smart, Kari. I'm kind of a half a smarty. I probably could have figured that out. But, like, wouldn't it be cool if, like, you have someone telling you what to do every day? Life is busy, to your point. It really helps, because what I've realized is if you don't do that and you're intentional every day, it's like, whoa, I had a bad yesterday. Or, well, I didn't do the thing with my kids today. I'll do it tomorrow. But next thing you know, your oldest is turning 10 next year. You know how the hell you got so old. And
Hmm.
you're like, and I'm not saying I'm like, shoulda, coulda, woulda, if I would have had that moment back. But wouldn't have been cool if I had a small win on some of those days I didn't. It would have.
And so all you do is you do it better the next time, right? And who can give you those answers of what you should be doing is your kid. A lot of times, right? And so a lot of times we're asking them about them. We should also ask them about us, right? So that conversation is, what could I do that would be helpful? What do I do that you really appreciate? What do I do that you wish I never did again? Right. And obviously there's things like, oh, I wish you didn't make me eat my vegetables. Okay, well,
Yeah, it's
guess
like
what?
the iPad and chocolate. I'm like, what
Right. Yeah.
more? Like,
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, that's how you also can see, because we have this, and this is just a human thing, right? We tend to assume that everybody else wants what we want and needs what we need, and that's just not true. And so you may think, you're providing all this great support and this and that, and your kid is not experiencing it that way at all. And there's just, you're trying really hard and putting in the effort, but the connection isn't happening because that's not what they actually need. And maybe you're not a big hugger, but they are, or maybe you're a huge hugger and they don't really like that.
you're
Makes
cringy.
right,
Cringy.
right. And yes, you have those moments where it's like you intentionally embarrass your kid because it's funny and you laugh about it, right? But it's finding that connection, that balance of what works for them, because we're the adults in the equation. They're the kids. They're the ones who are still learning. They're the ones who are going to be clumsy and not know how to do things without embarrassing you, or right, like that's our job. Literally, is to be the adult in that interaction, being able to ask them, okay, how am I doing? No, we get 360 evaluations at work. We get feedback and job performance reviews. Have your kid, it can be humbling, trust me, but have your kid give you a 360, and that can be really helpful to figuring out, okay, what are the things that I never knew that mattered in the slightest, but it's making a big deal to them. And then you can do more of that. And so also, not just, we talk about this with parenting, catch your kids being good, right? And point out the things they're doing well so they know to keep doing those, rather than ignoring the good and only pointing out the bad. Ask your kids about what you're doing that's good, not just, okay, what do I need to fix, right? Because we get very focused on fixing things. But if we know what we should
Celebrate
keep
the
doing
wins.
instead, that's what your behavior actually is, not just a laundry list of don'ts. So ask the questions.
Yeah, that all makes sense. Well, listen, take a deep breath, because now we're going to have our Flex Fire segment. Our Flex Fire, real easy, some rapid fire questions. Quick, I'm curious from you, some rapid fire answers. Nothing too crazy. I'm not going to ask you if you feel like the Jets are ever going to the Super Bowl, anything that'll make you
Probably
uncomfortable.
not. I
Good,
actually
very.
teach a class on being a sports fan, so we could talk sports, but yeah.
I should probably go to that class. And if you serve alcoholic beverages and tell me I'm looking at the wrong team every year. I don't know. There's a new Instagram thing. It was funny. Like a kid, they got him coming out of the Jet game recently, and he's so. I don't know if you've seen it. I'll send you after. He's basically like, I hate this team. They do this to me every year. I'm never gonna not like them because it's in the blood. But I'm just like
Right.
so mad at them.
Yep. That's
So
being a
that won't be
sports
a part
fan.
of the Flex Fire questions.
No. Okay.
First one's, what's one thing your research has taught you about dads that surprised you the most?
They are not as hard to research as everybody says. Everybody says, oh, we can't get dads to participate. And my experience has been, if you directly ask them and go to where dads are and don't just advertise for parents, and in places like daycares and doctors' offices, which are kind of mom spaces, you find them.
That's interesting. What's one small thing dads can do daily that makes a measurable difference for their kids? And if you design one universal dad habit for the next generation, what would it be?
I think the DDS, right? I'm not a shameless plug for you at all, but really that coming up with
Kari, I love you.
a quick connection, right? Whatever, I don't think there's a specific flavor it has to be, but having that intentional daily connection with your kids is huge.
That's amazing. Thank you for that. I promise it wasn't prompted, but
It was not. It was not.
that was cool. What's one thing you wish every new dad understood from day one?
How important they are to their kids. A lot of dads in our society teach them that they're optional, and they're not. So I wish they all understood how important they are.
What do you think we can do to push that agenda a little bit?
That's a really big question.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
not a flex fire. We're pressing pause on the flex
no,
fire.
that's a big question, right? It's all the policies, right? Like we tell dads, we communicate things again in a lot of different ways. And it's the fact that paternal leave is always less than maternal leave, and the fact that custody is 80% in favor of mothers relative to fathers. And it's the fact that all the school forms and the doctor's forms have room for one parent, and it's usually the mom who fills it out. And it's right, like it's these million little
Yeah.
things that communicate I'm not the key person here. Right. And it's clear. And you don't ever actually have to say you don't matter for dads to get the message that they don't matter. And so we're starting to see more of that changing, things like having changing tables in men's bathrooms. Because yeah, dads sometimes change diapers when they're out to eat.
Oh, I hate to break
Right?
it to you. We do.
Right,
Hardcore.
right, and it's all those little things that add up, of having pictures of dads in elementary schools or preschools, of having it needs to just be visible and present and part of the messaging, of not having all the commercials show the incompetent dad. I swear if I see one more paper towel commercial that consists of dad and the kids destroying the kitchen and the mom coming in and going,
Oh, what are you guys doing?
"I'll clean it up with these magnificent paper towels," right? Like it's all of that stuff that communicates it, that'll start shifting, and they say, "Oh, well, we're just reflecting what's out there." And it's like, but it's out there because we're not challenging it. We can also use these things to challenge norms. We don't realize what the norm is until something goes against it and we go, "Oh, that's unexpected,"
Yeah.
like
Well,
needing a
that's
changing
exactly what
table.
I'm doing with DadderUp. You just literally, besides the DDS, thank you. You just straight up hit right on the head because I feel that way. I am proud of being a girl dad. I don't necessarily know what it's like to have, a son. I couldn't imagine. At this point, I'm so girl dad vibes. It's pretty crazy, but I'm proud of it. I also get extreme joy seeing other dads leaning into their kids and seeing the kids light up. And I feel like it should be celebrated as well. And it's the dad, to your point, it's always like the mommy and me or whatever. And there's nothing
Mhm.
against that. I think that all has to
That's
stay the
also
same.
valuable, right? But also, yeah, also
Agreed. So complete the sentence. Legacy is
daily interactions, not the big stuff.
love it. What's one stereotype about dads you'd love to retire forever? I'm sure you hit on a little bit.
Oh, geez, yeah, there's quite a few of them, that they don't care, that dads are incompetent and they don't care, because they do.
You sure do. If you could send every dad in the world one message, a single push notification right now on their phones, what would it say?
Your kid needs you and is paying attention to you.
Even if you don't realize, right? And the last one, what's a myth about fatherhood the data just doesn't back up?
Oh, there's all kinds of those too. I think well, first of all, that dads don't care, and that if dads don't live in the household, that they aren't involved and they aren't connected to their kids. That was a pretty big research project that started back in 2000, 1999, 2000, where they did a study of 5,000 families, most of them unmarried, to say, okay, what's going on when the parents aren't married and they have a kid? And so they took them from the day their kid was born in the hospital and have followed those. They did the year 22. The kids are now 25 years old in 2025. And so they've been following them for 25 years. And the biggest surprise that came out of that was, just because these parents aren't married and the dad's not in the household, dad's actually really involved and really connected and still influential over his kids. They tended to assume that it's like, oh, if he didn't live there, then he's not involved at all. And they're involved in a whole lot of ways, even if it's not like right there in the moment every day.
Which is really just the big foundation here, which is being into everything you said, right? Being intentional every day, realizing the dad actually does matter. He does, it's like one of the dads out in the war, he comes home, it's just like that old fashioned type of thing, it's just the dad matters, the dad energy doesn't have to be pure masculine, Navy SEALs, CrossFit. Like it could be softer. It could be empathetic, right? You just said listening. There's a lot of empathy. I know plenty of guys that possess that, pretty big, tough guys that I know that are going to be the first dadders in our community, heads of the fire department, investment guys, entrepreneurs, anything, teachers, and they do possess that energy. So it's really just redefining, turning on its head what it means to be all those masculine things. Even the word, like you said, masculinity in 2025 moving forward, especially around being a dad, that definitely needs to be redefined as well.
Well, and we're seeing all kinds of lots and lots of evidence that nobody is helped by gender stereotypes. Right. And there's been a lot of focus, through the feminist movement and all of that about how women are harmed by gender stereotypes, but men are as well, because it's not how people are human. We are artificially dichotomizing people into two distinct opposite sets of traits when we all have all of them. And we need to be able to be just human. And there's tons of research showing that having that mix of expressive and instrumental, or masculine and feminine, or, kind of authority driven versus emotional, however you want to frame it, we need to be fully human to be healthy. And that's just, kind of the bottom line. And so to the extent that we keep pushing these gender norms that push people into opposite boxes, it's not helping anyone in our society.
Yeah. Well, listen, I appreciate you breaking down the science behind presence and connection and what we try to live out, especially from the DadderUp perspective. I wholeheartedly appreciate all the work you put into just this movement in general. For me, just one guy in New York, it means a lot to me. So, keep at it for sure. I couldn't have any more respect for you. So I appreciate everything you just kind of discussed with me and kind of dove into. We always close out the show with what I love to call our Dadderian creed.
Okay.
So you're going to take us out. I'm going to say our creed naturally. Creed to me, there's a lot of definitions of creed. It's really the heartbeat of DadderUp. So I'm going to say it, and then you're going to take us out for this episode. So I'm a
Sounds
dadder.
good.
I don't chase perfect. I chase presence. I lead quiet and confident. I build my family, my foundation, and my legacy. I take reps in patience, discipline, and love. I break old patterns, not promises. Legacy isn't someday, it's today.
Let's dad.
You're like the best resource, and I couldn't respect anything more about what you're doing in your mission. So thank you so much for being our guest. And until next time, guys, we'll see you then.